Well, Tiger, welcome to Talkin' the Talk, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Man, as you know, I've been a long-time Kadavar fan, since the first album, and you also probably know that just by knowing me that I'm very opinionated when it comes to the bands and the music that I love. And I loved everything, and then for some reason Rough Times kind of had me a little lost, and I could never really figure out what it was. And then when I went back to it, I found that what I think it was that it seemed to be a much darker album. Would you agree with that as far as it being a darker album leading up to the most current one?
I think that it was definitely a darker album following Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that For the Dead Travel Fast is equally dark, but maybe it's a different dark. It's not the, being fed up with what goes on in your life dark, like in Rough Times, but it's rather the, fantasy darkness. And the being, how do you put it? It's hard to say because I'm not a native speaker. But let's maybe for now keep it with that I would say it's a different kind of darkness. What do you think? Is it equally dark or not?
Well, it's funny because to me Berlin was almost kind of a fantasy album as well. You know what I mean? Like there were a lot of really great songs, and the songs were not so much lighthearted, but they were easier to grasp onto. And I think that with Rough Times, it kind of caught me off guard. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like, wow, this is really dark, but very personal. And it took me about a year, maybe a year and a half later, to go back and revisit it and really understand how there was more of a personal darkness to it. Whereas with the new album, For the Dead Travel Fast, I feel like it's kind of like a mix between Rough Times and Berlin, if that makes sense. So in other words, it's got that kind of fantasy aspect, but it's got the darkness of Rough Times. So combined, it really makes for a really diverse album, which I think, to be honest, is probably what I consider to be your most diverse album to date. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it, actually.
Interesting. And thanks for the compliment. It's always kind of hard to, categorize your own creative output. So I always appreciate when, people give me their thoughts on how this is different or better or worse than what we've done before, or how it compares. Because for yourself, if you've been working on something so hard and so long, even if there's a certain satisfaction in the end, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I cannot really say what the difference is. You know what I mean?
As a musician myself, I know exactly what you're speaking of, because when you are so engulfed and involved in not just the recording process, but the writing process and the creative process, and then the production. But at that point, it's almost like you're so tired of hearing your own stuff that you kind of have this warped idea of what you think it is, and then you just have to kind of put it in the hands of your fans and your listeners and let them be the judge of what it is you've come up with, because you can't really talk about it because you've spent so much time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about all our records, there is with every record there is a certain emotion that I have, but it's very hard to explain. But if I think of this record, it's like this part of my heart. If I think about a different record, I have a very strong and present feeling. But that's how I categorize it. It's probably connected to the time when we wrote the songs and what we were doing at the time, what was happening in our lives. There is with every record there is a certain energy feels very present to me. But yeah, like I said, that's the category that I think of.
Because one of the things I've noticed about Kadavar records, which I always love, is that one always seems, starting with Abracadavar, and then every album seems to grow off of the other one. Now, when it came to Rough Times, do you think that was just kind of like you said, like where you were at that exact moment? Was that the album that just needed to be made in order to kind of clear your mind, clean, you know what I mean? Like kind of exude those emotions that you were holding on a more personal level?
Definitely. What should I say about it? I think, yeah, it was like that. Maybe with Rough Times, it was, we did that in the most conscious way, free ourselves from what we've been doing before, going back to self-production, which means that I produced the record again, having produced the first and the second, while Berlin was like an outsourced product, so to speak. And I think we went enough into the direction of very compact songwriting, kind of, I don't want to use the hit word, but I think we try to shrink the songwriting to the barest essence with Berlin and be like really compact and rather positive. It was rather a celebrating record than the following. That was something that we needed to free ourselves again from with Rough Times, thinking more about what's shitty in this world, what causes us trouble, and what we struggle with on a personal level. Yeah. So for the Dead Travel Fast, though, like you said, like you're definitely in a different place in your mind and in your emotions, because even songs like, while I still feel like there's some personal ties to them, like other past records, like like The End, even Dancing with the Dead, I kind of felt like there was something in there that was a little personal, as well as Demons in My Mind. And then, of course, to be honest, like my favorite track on the album is the closing epic, the Long Forgotten Song, which I thought was just a spectacular song. But I was curious to hear a little more about that and what went into the creation of that song, because that's a pretty special tune from what I get. Yeah, so the fun fact about it is that I had this song in my mind for 7 years, and I never put it to paper. I never recorded it. I never sang it into my iPhone, which I usually do with a lot of ideas that later find their way into riffs and songs.
Right.
And this one kind of stuck in my head for 6 years. I planned to put it on Abracadaver already. And then I thought, maybe on the next one it's not ready yet. And it kept being like that until finally, at the end stage of the process recording for the Dead Travel Fast, I presented it to Lucas, and he said, "Hey, it's great. Maybe finish it, because the riff you have sounds very promising, and you should make the song." And that's what I did. So when we started thinking about what the lyrics could be, I think that was the question that you initially asked. We thought it might be a good idea to, go down memory lane and think about the time when I first had the idea in my mind, like when the band was at an early stage, how it was for us to, being kicked into the touring thing and into the music business. We were very young and unexperienced at the time.
Right.
And the first 2 years was very exciting. It was a lot of, we didn't think too much what we were doing. We partied a lot and met met a lot of great people and experienced a lot of really cool stories, and we traveled all the world. And now, 7 years later, it feels like a whole lifetime ago. Like, I think we are a little different now. We are more grown, and it was actually the first time that I've looked at that phase of the band and realizing that it's different now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what inspired me to write those lyrics.
Because I just thought it was so fantastic that you closed the album out with that, because, you know, when I think back to the 2012 debut, you know, even listening to that album to this day, like 7 years later, it's still holds up really well. But, like, you know, 7 years nowadays is a long time for a band to be around. You know what I mean? And so with the newest album, I felt like what I loved about Long Forgotten Song was that, exactly like you said, like, it encapsulated all of your experience from the very first album to where you are at right now. And while you guys haven't, you know, Kadavar hasn't strayed too far away from your oh God, I'm kind of trying to think of the word here. Like the way that you play and the style that you play, but yet the new album sounds very matured, you know, and from that maturity, does that come from the incessant touring and, like you said, the experiences?
I think we definitely matured from touring, because, you know, after like 7 years of playing 100 shows a year, you just know how it works. And I also know my band members a lot better many years after we started playing together. And I think also the songwriting, you know, with every record you get more experience, and you know how the band works together, and maybe also it's easier to present a vision. And I even think that songwriting for me is deeply connected to the project that you're working with. Like when I write songs, I write them for Kadavar.
Right.
And if I had a different project, I would probably write a whole lot of different things that might not sound like Kadavar at all. Mm-hmm. So it's like project connected or band connected, like everything we do. And I think we kind of have a certain formula that we can, you know, that we can follow to a certain degree, and maybe do things differently. But yeah, that's probably some kind of a maturing process that we continuously go through.
Yeah, because that's exactly the word, by the way. I was looking for formula. How you like that? I'm American, and I can't even come up with the American word, you know? So shows you the intelligence of the American people. But no, I love that you said that, though, about the formula, because obviously, you know, you have a fan base, but at the same time, with each album not sounding the same, you kind of maintain this one formula but you expand on it. But you said something that just interested me about how you said you tend to, sometimes you write songs that might not be a Kadavar song. What do you do with that material? Is that the kind of stuff that you put aside that might work for Kadavar later on? Or is it something that you do on your own as a side thing?
I would say that I sometimes have ideas that I categorize no Kadavar, mm-hmm. And some of those ideas stay in my head, or I have, like, say, recorded a version of it, not because I consciously am planning to release them otherwise, but because I don't have the time, and I feel like it would be over my capacity because we are touring so much. And I also feel kind of satisfied with releasing, like, writing 3, 4, 5, 6 songs for a record every year and put everything into it that I want. Well, I don't know if it's gonna stay like this, but the past records I always felt kind of satisfied and not urged to, or capable of doing more with it, because that's the way it is, I guess.
Because again, one of the things I love about Kadavar is that all the albums seem to have a very loose feel to them. So when you go into the studio to record, do you go in with just enough songs for an album, or are you guys usually cutting, like, I don't know, let's say like for The Dead Travel Fast, there's 9 songs. Like, did you guys go into the studio and maybe cut like 15 songs and then you have to pick from the 9, or do you go in with an exact number or an exact list of songs?
The question is a little difficult to answer because we have our own studio, and when we enter the studio, there is nothing.
Oh.
So in the, like, let's say there's a certain time frame when we know now it's time to start writing songs. And most of the time, it's like we start playing riffs that are somehow connected to what we last did. Like, we had some riffs that were like sounded like Rough Times sessions until we got like very pissed with that wasn't satisfying us because it wasn't what was supposed to be the new record. And going through this, I would say even going through this painful phase of not having a fucking clue what we want to do. Sometimes there is the point, there's always the point where there's light at the end of the tunnel and where you realize this riff sticks and this has a new energy. And I think with this record, it was Evil Forces. That's like the third track on the record. When we had the key riff for that one, I felt like, it's a different kind of dark. It's like horror-ish. There's a certain feel to it that is could be a Kadavar song, but not like on the last record. And I think this was also when we started brainstorming, like having a photo shoot in Romania at the Castle of Dracula, and like going like very obviously into this horror imagery and direction. That's when the whole thing came together for me. When we come to this point, that's when we really like get super creative and present new ideas every day. And this is a phase of like 4 to 8 weeks where we just like keep on spinning ideas and put things together. Sit a lot at home. Lucas, he works a lot at home, and I work a lot like in the studio. And then we we kind of put all those things together until we finally have 10 to 12 songs. And then we record them all. I think in this case we recorded 11 songs, put 9 on the record, and then the rest is bonus material. We're gonna also release like a bonus, like a package with the LP and the bonus LP with outtakes and some special stuff. That's how we do it.
That's really cool to hear, because that's what I'm glad you reminded me, because I totally forgot that a few years ago you guys started building your own studio. That must really take a lot of pressure off of you guys going into a regular studio where you say you're paying by the hour. So does having your own studio where you can go anytime you want, does that take a lot of the pressure off of you to rush and write?
Well, not of me, because I have to record all this stuff and make all the decisions now, which I gladly do. But I wouldn't say it takes pressure off me, because now I'm the one that's going to be held liable if the result is not good. But I'm fine with it. No, I think I really like being in a small bubble. You don't have to explain anything to anyone else. You just create your own vision, and it's a different pressure. If for example we would be in our rehearsal space and not having all the facilities of producing the record, then it would probably just be a different kind of pressure. But since we recorded Berlin in a different studio and it turned out a great result, we found out that we enjoyed more to really be by ourselves with no one else and do everything on our own.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because when you're in control of your own, like you said, where you don't have to explain it to another producer or a engineer or whatever, when you're doing it all yourself, you have those ideas and you have that control, and you don't have to explain it. You can just do it yourself. But as someone like myself who has for years produced his own, like I've produced all my own solo albums, do you also find it hard to sometimes pull yourself out of the artist position, and then, like, do you have a hard time separating being the artist and then being the producer? Like, how hard is that for you?
I think it's not hard at all, because I think that it's kind of separate, because we always demo everything before we really record it. So when we really record the final version, we have been going through a process of demoing already, and like all the producing questions and the way we want to do it, it's like there is a vision already. So as an artist, I just execute when we record. And I think all the artistic choices, most of them, I mean, you cannot separate it 100%.
Right.
Because recording is also a form of art, I would say, a creative thing. But it's separated by the time frame. Like you do the demos first, and then you record. And when we record, I'm rather the producer, and when we demo, I'm rather the artist. So something like that.
I personally have a hard time sometimes splitting the roles, because, like when you're producing, it's hard to sometimes let go of certain things, like, oh, I should go back and re-record that, where instead of you're like, nope, that's it. If I could re-record this song 7 times and not be happy with it. So I have to, it's hard for me to kind of break that role sometimes, Yeah.
And that's why I love deadlines.
That's my problems. I never have a deadline, because I can put out my albums whenever I want, and my band can put out albums whenever we want.
Yeah.
So the deadlines actually help you then, I guess, because it gives you kind of a target. You have a goal that you have to meet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, like it's a pain in the ass, and it's always the last week. It's a very stressful time. With like 15 hours, 16 hours of work in the studio without break, and with probably a gallon of coffee. But that's the way it is. In the end, it has been beneficial for us.
So this lineup has been together for a while now, and obviously you guys have a very tight-knit relationship, almost like a brotherhood of sorts. Does recording ever cause, especially when you were talking about these like 15-hour days, do times like that actually or ever put some strain on your relationship, or do you feel like it just makes you stronger?
In the end, it does make us stronger. I mean, I have really stopped to give a fuck what I always say my opinion, and I think in the last years, I think we have been going through a phase where it was a bigger problem giving each other opinion, because in the end, everyone has a vision of how the song is supposed to be. But I think it's easier to communicate that now, and it doesn't cause much trouble anymore. But getting to know yourself through recording process is also sometimes painful, and causes arguments and all that. Which is just normal, because everybody cares so much about what he's doing,
Right.
So it's just natural. But I think we've been doing it a long time ago that I can just, with confidence say what I think, and maybe the other one doesn't like it, but then it's cool, and you make a compromise in the end. Most of the time it works, and if it doesn't work, then somebody has to fight.
Like, I couldn't imagine you guys like fist fighting or anything, but but again, like I said, for the Dead Travel Fast is by far my favorite Kadavar album to date. I feel like you guys really nailed it. But now the only problem I can see for you guys now is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 albums deep now. Like, that must be hard to actually start to make a set list for. So for the upcoming tour, are you guys going to put a little more concentration on the new material, or are you finding a way to kind of pull some favorites from each album?
I have the feeling, I mean, we have to cut it short anyway, because I think nobody wants to see us for like 2.5 hours. It's like, it's intense and it's loud, and I think 90 minutes is a lot for heavy music.
I want to hear you for 2 hours, man.
I mean, we do 90 minutes. Maybe we do 100 minutes in the future. But the audience has to get used to it as well, and we have to see like if it's rather beneficial, or if like the attention span of our audience is maybe not that long.
Right.
But yeah, we're gonna mix all the records. But the way I feel is I also want to play a lot of the new songs, not just 2 or 3, but rather 5.
So what is one particular song off the new album that you look at and you go, that is one that needs to be played?
The Devil's Master, definitely. Evil Forces, I want to play. I want to play Children of the Night. I also want to play Dancing with the Dead and Demons in My Mind. And I mean, it's stupid to say, but right now I would like to play all of them.
It wouldn't be the first time a band went out and played an entire album, of new material,
But also, I don't like the idea of like pushing the new record too much, because people also want to listen, to the familiar stuff. And even if myself, I would like to play rather like all of them, we probably cut it down to like 4 or 5 songs in the end, which is, I think, a lot to present of the new record.
I think it's a lot more than what most bands do when they put out a new record. So actually playing half of a new album, that's a pretty bold statement to how strongly you're behind your new material.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of times you'll see a band who put out a brand new album and they'll play 2 songs off of it, and you're like, what happened to the other 8? Or whatever happened to the other 9? But then you also look at it and you go, okay, well, but they've got 6 albums worth of material they've got to cover, and they're songs that the fans want to hear. Like in your case, like as a fan of yours, I want to hear Purple Sage and Black Sun, and I want to hear Doomsday Machine too, so it's like you have to kind of gear your set list to what your fans are also going to want to hear too.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we try all the time.
So with this tour, are you guys do you guys generally change the set list up from night to night, or do you guys pretty much do the same set list every show?
This is something that has caused a lot of discussions in the past. But I think what we try to do now is play more or less the same set list for one tour, not necessarily 100%, but switch one here and there. So like we rotate a little bit, so all the songs stay fresh. That's for sure. But I think it's a good idea to have a certain set list in 2019, and then have a slightly different one in 2020. So when you go to a town 2 years later, make sure that you maybe play 2 or 3 different songs. And I think that's the easiest way to do it.
Right. So what about your touring schedule? Like, are you guys gonna? I mean, obviously you tour very heavily in Europe and all over the place. You haven't been back to the States in quite a while. So will we maybe see a U.S. tour for this album?
Yeah, actually, the first glimpse of a tour is going to happen very, very soon, as we embark on our first North American tour since 2015, when we supported the Sword together with All Them Witches. The first short return to the States, and I'm to come back more often again in the next years. We have a visa that starts now for 12 months, so we try to come back 3 times.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you, you and me are long due for a beer on your bandwagon again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Tiger, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk about just Kadavar and the excellent new album for the Dead Travel Fast. I am so excited about this record. I actually can't wait to get a copy because that album cover looks just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks so much for for the nice words and for the chat. Appreciate it that you took the time, and I hope to see you soon again in Atlanta.
Same here, and first round's on me.
All right, I say the second one then.
I love it. Well, we will talk to you again and hopefully see you again soon, Tiger.
All right, thank you, Don. Bye-bye.
Thank you.